Oh, shalom, my friends, shalom, my enemies. This is your old pal, Rabbi Sol Solomon, founder and spiritual leader of Temple Sons of Bitches in Great Neck, New York. And speaking of New York, we're talking to a person that if you knew anything about New York radio, and I don't mean like crappy radio above 92 on the dial. I'm talking like in the college in the good section, or what used to be the good section. Now all radio sucks. Back in the day, like 98% of radio sucked. No, but here's the deal. One of the things making it better was this guy in the station that he was on for many years. He's Darren DeVivo, and he has hosted many slots and programs on WFUV out of Fordham University in the Bronx. Well, he's been doing, since Dave, the host of this program, was doing theater reviews in the late 1990s on WFUV is when they met. Darren was co-hosting with Amy Eddings in the morning show. You know, wonderful, happy times. Dave left the station a couple of years after that. But Darren stayed until a couple of weeks ago. Did he leave under his own steam? No. Darren, first of all, shalom to you. Happy holidays. Welcome.
Shalom, and thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor
It
for
is.
me to
It
be
is. It
here.
is. Yes.
It is-
So, pardon my French, but what the fuck
Yes.
happened?
Um, I was let go. I was by technically Fordham University. The WFUV is owned by Fordham University. In a nutshell, that's the simplest way to describe the relationship. And we had, as a non-commercial radio station, WFUV depends upon our listeners to donate. And that roughly makes up something in the ballpark of 60% of our operating budget, which is by far the largest portion of our operating budget, are donations coming from listeners. Critical. We don't get that, we're done instantly. Okay. So that's important, but also there was a piece of our operating budget coming from the government, funds from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is part of the pie. If you picture the budget as being a pie, I think
Now I'm hungry. Yes.
I I think we're talking approximately 7% of our operating budget came from the government. I believe that's the number. Don't hold me to that. My memory is shot as I've gotten older. But essentially,
Who are you?
President Trump did away with the funding for public broadcasting. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting went poof and disappeared, and public broadcasting radio and TV stations and all media were affected. And it hit WFUV head on.
But
And I
why did
was
the
let go.
7% have to include you? I mean, there's still 93% of the funding left.
Well,
What, you know?
I'm throwing numbers around, hoping that I'm accurate, but there was some number I saw somewhere that we're talking about it losing about $500,000, I believe was the number I saw. I was never, I was the only guy who went to college, started out in accounting, realized within about 45 minutes I'd made a big mistake, and got through somehow as being a business major at Fordham, not being a numbers person and not really being interested in accounting or finance or anything like that. So you could blow my mind with numbers. And a lot of times in staff meetings, I'd start to glaze over when, but there's something like some ridiculously high amount of money was lost, even though it was a small portion
Oh,
of the
all right.
budget. So what happened basically was I'm thinking Fordham University might have been the heavy. It could have been a 50-50 between the university and the radio station. I have no idea, but the decision was made that the easiest way to cut payroll was is to well, no,
Cut,
the
cut
easy,
pay rate. The easiest way to save money is to cut
right, is to
humans.
cut
Yeah.
payroll. And I was one of five staff members
All right.
to get the boot on the same time, on the same day at the same time, which was very bizarre. And I don't know too many instances where people get fired in mass. Um, in fact, when I got the letter that I was to appear in a meeting the next morning, a mandatory meeting, and I was to be there,
Mm.
which gave me chills the way it was written, probably written by a lawyer. Um,
I mean,
I
did they
found
make you
out,
clear out your cubby the same day? I mean, did they say, okay, you're leaving now, you never came back near a microphone because you'll probably say
no,
horrible
I never,
things.
no, I never said goodbye. My last show ended up being Saturday, October 6th. I think I was filling
September 6th.
September 6th. Yes,
Yeah.
just about a month. Yeah, a month ago. Look at that. A month ago today that we're recording this. Um,
And, and,
uh,
and we thought the Hamas attack was the worst thing to happen on October 6th. What do you know? Let this happen. By the way,
yeah.
how many years had you been? Was
All
it
right.
40?
I was on mic. I was on the air at WFUV for 41 years plus. Okay, but take into consideration the station had changed a lot in that time, but I was a constant presence on 90.7 FM for 41 years, going back to early 84. My first show was February 26th, 1984. And during the 80s, for the most part, we were a typical college station, but we had a very powerful signal. And I just happened to be around as the 80s became 1990 when the administration and the general manager was orchestrating change. And they say sometimes you need to be lucky, you need to be in the right place at the right time. I was around and kept getting called back to do fill-ins because I lived nearby. I knew the equipment. It was a lot easier to call me than try to get uh, maybe a student on staff who weren't as committed to certain shifts. Or it was just a lot easier to pick up the phone and say, Darren, Friday night, can you do it again next week? Sure. Could you
Now,
do it again in a month? And then that led to me in the summer of 90 meeting with the program director at the time just to see what was going on up there and to tell her I wished them all the best. I knew I was done. I thought I was done at FUV because I had graduated now. They were making changes. They were hiring professional staff. I figured I'm done, but I'll have a sit down and just see what's going on. And I got the, oh, by the way, would you be interested in filling in when the morning disc jockey who had just been hired goes on vacation Christmas week, or during the fundraiser when she'd never fundraised before and didn't want to deal with the board operation and the technical aspect of it. She just wanted to announce. So I agreed to come in and run the board for 5 days in the fall of 90, came back Christmas week of 90, filled in that morning show those 5 days. And then it was you want to do this full time because we're going to do this music format that we've placed in the morning drive. We're moving it to afternoon drive. We're looking to do that mid-January 91. Would you be interested?
would
And
I? Were
Tower
you working
Records.
at that point? How were you supporting yourself during those early years before you had a full-time-ish gig at
But I
FUV?
lived, I, I lived at home. I was still at home with my folks.
All right.
And I as it turned out, I mean, of course, I said yes. I was working at Tower Records in Yonkers at the time on Central Avenue. I quit that job, obviously, and started sometime in the middle of January 91 on a Monday afternoon at either 2 or 3, doing afternoon drive. And then they moved me exactly a year later to morning drive because the morning disc jockey had quit. And they put me on mornings, which made me a full-time employee at Fordham in January 92. And I started, which I couldn't do today in the atmosphere that we have today, but I started dating uh, a graduate student
A
while I was doing
graduate student. All right. Yeah. All
I
right.
was, well, I was technically a staff member of Fordham. I was a DJ in the afternoons, and she started interning at FUV, and we're married now. So I met my wife at the station right at that transition time in the early 90s, and the rest is history, as they say. I stayed. I was on board till a month ago.
And by the way, you are still on board with the Mrs. Mit Mazel McGlick.
Yep. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And what's really nice is even though that you are currently unemployed because of what FUD, but she's employed. In fact, we won't say the name or anything, but she's a college president.
Yeah, well, she could say, yeah, my wife is Dr. Sharon DeVivo, who's the president of Vaughn College, which is in Queens. It's located on the other side of the Grand Central Parkway from LaGuardia Airport. And so that's her gig. And but when we met, she was going for her master's at Fordham, and
Well,
at the giveaway was that when I saw her, we had met a couple of times. I was on the air and coming out of the on-air studio. This was in '91. I tripped and fell over a stool because I saw her down the hallway and I was distracted and forgot the stool that propped up the outer door of the studio was in the way. I went down pretty hard, but it left a mark, and my wife thought, "Oh, he fell over a stool for me."
that's,
So,
yeah, yeah. I've sometimes had for my wife loose stools, but that is a very, very different thing that she has to deal with. But let me ask you: is she able to maybe give you an adjuncting gig at
no,
her Vaughn?
no,
No, no,
no.
no.
That would be a complete conflict of interest, and
Yeah.
I'd end up fired in a couple of days.
Oh, no, we don't. You don't,
Yeah,
especially not now. You don't want to.
Sure.
So let me ask you the thing though. I am when you first started doing stuff, any kind of stuff at FUV, even filling in. What did they have that format? Because one of the reasons FUV was very listenable for all those years is they played Dylan and Van Morrison and mix of folk and pop and rock, and it's a really nice format compared to most of what else is. What were they playing in the early '80s? Was it just students coming in and doing what
Well,
they
yeah,
wanted?
in the early 80s we were a typical college station, but we weren't. What was funny was that when I would listen to other stations, if I could get them, because usually college radio stations have weak signals, small signals. They broadcast maybe just to the campus or the neighborhood. And here we're covering all of the complete New York City metro area. But we were a station that played a lot of rock, but it was a combination of like established names. Today would be classic rock and a lot of new and alternative artists mixed together. We weren't like a hardcore college station that got really deep and played your friend's band from up the block off cassette, or we play some unsigned guy who dropped off his 45.
Got it.
We had a little bit of a commercial approach to the music. There was formats, but they were very loose for the morning drive and afternoon drive. You had big categories. You had to just pick a couple of songs out of each category per hour, mix them a certain way, but you were picking the music. And then, of course, the overnights were free format.
Ah,
So when you went on the air at 11 at night, there was two DJs. There'd be an overnight shift at 2 a.m. That was where you had the opportunity to develop and actually develop what is a dying skill now, and that is a disc jockey who actually sits down and builds the show himself. Whether he does it in advance or wings it, it's usually both. You're building a show by putting music on that you think works and is not tied to any suit or any consultant or ratings. But this is, it's 2 in the morning and we're going to listen to this Bob Dylan song that's 12 minutes long and then go into something from Phil Oakes. And by the end of the hour, we'll be playing Emerson, Lake and Palmer, you know.
You
And so,
had me until ELP, but let me ask you, Darren. Here's the question: in the last few years of FUV, I mean, yes, they certainly had a program for it, but were you just like putting in the names of songs into a program rather than obviously no more discs or no more CDs, but just
yeah.
like play this, play this, play this, then PSA,
Yep.
PSA Fordham thing, ID, PSA.
It
So
was it was almost exactly like it is in commercial radio. And I would say it's been like this now for I'd say it's been like this for 10 years ish, a little more, a little less, depending. But the station is formatted, and there is a plan to what is played. The DJs have virtually no input. So I would get a playlist and I would get a log, of course, that would give me what needs to be announced, what
sure.
stuff needs to air and I'd have the playlist and I would look at the list and then I would go, okay, and I would make notes going through what's already been planned for me. Now, there would be choice opportunities to pick a song or two. If there was a theme or God forbid a death,
Oh my, yeah.
musician dies, they'll make, it would have to be a spot predetermined where we empty it out
Mhm.
and put in the song that I chose.
Oh,
And
so you
what
had
was
a
a little
little bit of
frustrating.
Still a little bit of freedom, but not
Very little.
comparatively.
Because like if somebody passed and I'm thinking I'd love to play these three songs, I might be told, oh, definitely play the artist. Let's keep it to one or two. And it'll be like, all right. Whereas 15 years ago, 10 years ago, more and even and beyond that, there was much more freedom for what the DJ was doing. That honestly doesn't exist now. But I'll say one little thing, the breadth of the artist, the amount of music that we do tap into is still huge compared to commercial radio. We just take this they just take
They
this
took.
um, these artists, these new artists, these new albums, and make a playlist out of it. But we're
Sure.
pulling from a larger um, pool of music than commercial radio would.
Hey, can I ask you who were your DJ heroes, if there were any,
Yeah.
when you were coming up in the ranks or when you were a kid? What did you listen to?
I remember because I'm from the Bronx, I'm a New York kid, and the earliest memories of radio was WABC,
Hmm.
Music Radio 77, WABC.
Cousin Brucey and those.
Exactly. And so that was my first station, and I was at the mercy of whatever mom or dad put on the radio in the car. But a lot of times it was for me WABC, or they would put on WNEWAM to hear the ballrooms, the big band
Oh,
stuff,
right.
uh, or occasionally WHN, which was an AM country station.
I remember.
That would be on all news. But my heroes, very early on from WABC, were like Ron Lundy, Harry Harrison.
Oh, yes, yes.
They were the two biggies for me. And then I remember Dan Ingram would come on in the afternoon.
Dan
Uh,
Ingram. Yeah.
exactly. And overnight, sometimes, I remember Chuck Leonard. And I remember, but he was on weekends. George Michael, he then did a sports show on television.
Right. Yes.
But my guys were Ron Lundy and Harry Harrison, and I sort of followed them years later to CBS, WCBS FM, because I believe they both went there. I
See.
know Harry Harrison was on CBS FM. And when I made it, found FM rock radio, there was a girl I had a crush on in school. It probably was the fourth or fifth grade in the mid 70s, and I heard her say she listened to WPLJ.
Oh, was it Carol Miller or was it
No, no,
oh,
no. She listened. This girl I had a crush on in school
yeah.
listened
Oh,
to
she listened to
WPLJ, and
right.
I had ran home, and I'm like with the newspaper trying to find 95.5 FM, and that actually turned me into an FM rock fan, and I rarely went back to AM. And from WPLJ, it was Pat St. John, it was Tony Pigg, um, Jimmy Fink.
Right.
But the guys that I kind of picked up a little after the fact towards the later 70s from finding WNEW-FM that became really the guys that I became heroes were Pete Fornatale.
Oh,
Um, I was very close with Pete because he came to WFUV then,
right. Yeah.
where he started his career in the 60s. Also, Dennis Elsis, who was still on WFUV today, came over, I think, in 2001 or 2000. And those were like the guys on WNEW FM that were they were largely responsible for me being here. And what's cool is that Dennis Elsis at FUV has a greeting card tacked on his bulletin board that I sent him in the I think it was in the 1980s when he was doing an anniversary show at WNEW-FM. And I was probably at that time thinking, how do I make connections? I'm going to send him a congratulatory card. And who knows, maybe that would turn into a job at WNEW-FM.
Right. Yeah.
So I wrote him a really nice card. I meant every word of it. You're a hero. Happy anniversary. I'm listening to you. Blah, blah, blah. He found it years ago and he still has it tacked up on his bulletin board. And he had the desk next to me at FUV until a month ago. And
Oh,
now
did
he's
they can Elsis too?
what?
Did they can Elsis too?
No, Dennis is still there. The
Oh,
other DJ that got fired, there were five
yeah. Yeah.
FUVers that were fired. two DJs, me and Eric Holland, who was on before me, Monday through Thursday, 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Then I was on 10 p.m. till 2 a.m., 4 nights a week. But I also had Saturday afternoons from 1 until 4. So I was on a fifth day
Now,
during the week.
can I
But
ask you
it's still there.
the most glorious moment or two in your 40 plus year history? Because so much of this is negative. So much of this is anger at the current administration, be it at the school, be it at the radio station, be it at the White House. But let's, like, incredible, wonderful, happy memories of doing radio.
It starts bleak, but September 11th, 2001. And I mean, that whole day changed everyone's life. And I do remember that morning, my kids were babies, and I was getting them ready for the day in preschool, and my parents coming over to watch them. And this is all unfolding on TV, and it's scary. And my wife is driving to work in Queens, so she's seeing everything over like the Whitestone Bridge at a distance, and the radio announced. So I could not stop for any extended period of time to see exactly what was happening because I had to be on the air at 10. So it was I had to go to the bank, and a lot of stops. When I got to the radio station, minute or two before I was to go on the air, I believe the first tower had just fallen. Claudia Marshall at the time was our morning disc jockey, and she was nearing the end of her show. And we went numb. Everybody at FUV went numb over the whole thing, obviously. And from that point on, they threw out the format. They threw out all plans and basically said, guys, play what works. Play what works, whatever works. Because we all knew the scope of what was happening, and it was getting worse by the minute. And then the other second tower falls.
Like 9:05, it was just a plane accident. Well, that's
It
sad.
was,
That
yeah,
second plane made it like history. The second plane
right.
is when everybody just
And
went,
when I came on the air, one tower was gone.
yeah,
And there is floating around out on YouTube a piece of an air check of me and Claudia Marshall together. She ended up staying on with me towards after. She had a bit of a news background. She ended up kind of being a makeshift newscaster for me, constant every 10, 15 minutes with updates. While I was playing the music, I probably had a Fordham student assisting me getting CDs because this was what was great about FUV at that time. We threw out the format, which wasn't as rigid as it is now. It was loose then, but we threw it out and said, we're going to take requests. We're going to play songs for the country, about New York City, and hopeful songs, freedom songs. And that went on for over a week, if not 2 full weeks, where our listeners were the outpouring of love coming from the listeners who were getting in touch with us because we were providing this break from this hell, and we were doing it in a way that was totally human and heartfelt. All the DJs, we all kind of clicked into the same mindset. So if you were listening, you heard the same flow going day after day after day coming from the WFUV DJs. And that was, I think, our high watermark. It could have been my high watermark at WFUV. I say could have because I always question my memory and think, am I forgetting something? Something else? But that was big. That was big. When being on the air in those days after 9/11, where you actually felt that you were making an impact and the listeners were reaching out and everything seemed to become, it was weird how at that time it was a horrific time, but there was also some sense of community and closeness happening. The exact opposite of what we feel today.
Yeah.
Right. But at that time we were coming together, and it was a good time. And so that was a high watermark. I'll leave it at that because there are probably other smaller ones, but
Yeah. No, I thought you were going to mention meeting some celebrity, interviewing so and so, but that's bigger.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not to brag, but there were so many that I interviewed.
But favorite, like one that you
Ringo
just
Starr,
like,
of course, because I'm a Beatles. I'm a Beatle nut, so getting to interview Ringo Starr was is the number one that comes to mind. But then beyond that, I mean, it was just, I mean, I'm being a Beatle nut, being a Beatlemaniac. I had the opportunity not only with Ringo, but to also kind of interview important figures that sort of surrounded the the
Hmm.
Beatle core, like some of the kids. I interviewed George Harrison's son, Danny Harrison, on several occasions. I interviewed Julian Lennon twice. Um, Briefly spoke with Sean Lennon on the air. That doesn't really count. That was very brief. And some of the members of Wings, McCartney's band from the 70s, I got to know, had to interview them. Of course, before the Beatles were the Beatles, they were the Quarrymen.
Right.
And the surviving Quarrymen were on my show at FUV several times. Uh,
Wow.
they
Well, it
made
is a rock station. Okay, quarry,
a
rock.
quarry. Very nice. Yeah,
But by the way,
sure.
you just led us into a wonderful little segue there to remind people that even though you are off the air at the radio station that we won't mention anymore until they hire you back, but people can hear you and knew you, not just archival stuff, but that you host not one, but two, count them, two different podcasts,
Yeah.
one of which is very much about the Beatles. It's called
Well,
the
they
both
both
are.
are.
Yeah.
The one I've been doing the longest is called Things We Said Today, which is the title of a Beatles song. And I host the show with Ken Michaels and Alan Kozin. Alan
I've
is
heard
in the
that
mix.
name. He's a
Well, he used to write for the New York Times. In fact, I believe he was the classical music editor for a very long time at the Times. Then kind of also became the Beatle guy. Any Beatle related news, Alan would cover for the Times. But he was the guy running the show, I believe, in the classical department for several decades. And now, with his partner Adrian Sinclair, they've published volumes one and volume two of the McCartney legacy, which is going to be the definitive history of Paul McCartney's post-Beatles career. They're working on volume three. The goal is to have five volumes. The books are like this big,
oh yeah.
chronicling McCartney's career. And Ken Michaels is a guy I've known forever, and he's a radio guy and a Beatle freak that's hosted Beatle radio shows for years. So that's Things We Said Today. They brought me on in 2018. And the newer one is Talk More Talk, a solo Beatles video cast. And that's hosted by Ken Michaels, so it's me and Ken again, and Kit O'Toole, who's an educator and an author as well, that has written a book on the Beatles. And
But
we
how does
talk.
this?
That show is only solo Beatles stuff.
Okay.
Only so, and Talk More Talk is a Paul McCartney song title. So, so we just do solo stuff unless it's a massive topic that will do the Beatles, but we concentrate on the solo years. And that I started doing the beginning of this year, I think in January. I replaced a host that had left. And so I have those going. And in a perfect world, when we're organized, we record every other week. So every week there's a new Beatles related podcast going out there that I'm co-hosting. And that's fun. It's not money, but it's fun. It's supposed to be kind of money, but I don't know how to go about other than finding
Put it
a
out
nickel
on,
table right now. That
was it like Patreon? Those two guys who do that show out in Chicago of rock reviews. What are they? Greg Kot and Jimmy
yeah,
Regatas do the whatever.
yeah.
Sound
Yeah.
Opinions. Well, I mean, they were on something, and they're just on Patreon or whatever. I don't know how much money they're making, if any.
Yeah, so we should actually be a little more aggressive in looking into that, but it's always like, who wants to do the homework?
Uh,
Well, I actually have now more time. I should be looking into stuff like that because my plan now is to start make myself be out there in addition to the podcast, maybe a third podcast, maybe a YouTube channel where I can have artists on, do interviews like I used to do at FUV. That dried up some years ago, but there was a time where I was doing three interviews a month, four interviews a month. Um, and it's something I miss doing and haven't done really any in-person interviews in over 5 years.
all right. This actually brings up a question. How much of your career has been audio archived how much do you have? And I mean, can you dip back into the 80s and have a reel or
I
more than
have
an air
some.
check? Yeah.
I have some stuff on reel to reel from the 80s. I didn't do many interviews then, but I have a couple of maybe air checks or special things that I recorded to reel that have sat in the same position they were in then that they're in now. So who knows what condition, but it's probably okay. I used to try to keep all the interviews I did on reel for sound quality purposes, and I amassed a pretty big closet of reel to reel tapes till I realized that tape was kind of going out and it was going to be more and more effort to salvage these things. And then it got too much. I couldn't keep up with so many interviews. I'd then come home with cassettes
Right. Oh,
and the cassettes were mounting and I'd forget to get an air check or recording of an interview I did. I'd forget a second one. Before you know it, I thought I can't do this.
yeah.
It's going to be cassettes all over the house. But there's stuff archived at WFUV, which now I really don't have any access to, but it's there. And, it's, I'm sure that I have enough friends at WFUV that if I asked nicely, they could say, sure, we give you a copy of, and some of the interviews I've done over the past maybe 10 or 15 years, the really big ones, important ones, I've made it a point to get like CDs burned. So I've got some stuff,
Yeah.
but it's
Especially
very
now that you're going to
haphazardly.
be out there saying, "Hey, hire me." And by the way, if there are programming directors listening, because there must be 3,000, 4,000 program directors listening to my program right now. Hire me and then hire him.
Yeah, then
Or
hire
hire me,
him.
I'll hire him, as my aide de camp. We can tag team together. Did you
Right,
know any
right.
Shlomo Carlebach songs? Are you
I maybe could hum a couple of bars.
there you go. Yeah, yeah. But by the way, I should have re-mentioned. We have a couple more minutes with Darren DeVivo. His two podcasts, Beatles-related podcasts, Things We Said Today about the full band, Talk More Talk, which is about the Beatles' solo careers post like 1969, 70. Where the hell can people
Yeah.
hear them?
Uh, well, they don't have a set time that we record them. We try to get one. Each show is every other week, bi-weekly. Now, for the sake of Ken and I, because we do both shows, we like to avoid them falling in the same week. But I could do it. Ken's got other Beatle related things he does that it gets too much for him. But we do a show at the beginning of the week in a perfect world. As soon as it's ready to roll, we just stick it up there and it's
Where?
there. So
Where?
what I tell people to do is go to YouTube. That's the easiest thing to do and search Things We Said Today or Things We Said Today podcast or Beatles podcast and or Talk More Talk solo Beatles podcast. Our pages will come up. There is an archive of all the shows that have been done. And I know we're way past 400 shows in Things We Said Today.
Wow.
And I don't know, in the hundreds with Talk More Talk. It's a newer show. And so we'd like to have a show up every 2 weeks or three. We just asked you go to YouTube Net, you can sign up and subscribe and get alerts supposedly when something new has been posted. We have a new show up there. Quick plug. We are actually, when I'm done here with you, I'm going to record a new Talk More Talk, which will be probably posted tonight or tomorrow. We're interviewing Denny Sywell, the original drummer of Wings, was with Wings from 71 to 73, just published his memoirs. We're going to have him on Talk More Talk, and then we're interviewing, hopefully next week, on Things We Said Today. And so there'll be more with Denny Sywell. We're going to be talking with, coming up, we're going to be talking with Gary Van Syok, a member of a band called Elephant's Memory that backed John and
Nice.
Yoko in 1972. He's a guest that's coming up and a whole lot more. The biggest name we've had on Things We Said Today was filmmaker Peter Jackson, which
Okay,
was
that's a pretty
that's
big name
pretty
right there.
big. And
Yeah.
that was, if I have a second to tell a funny story,
Always,
um,
always the
Peter
second coming.
Jackson was the guy who was responsible for the Beatles Get Back, the documentary that was on Disney that was like 10, 11 hours long. And it was debuted Thanksgiving weekend 2022 or one or three, one of those years. So about a week before it's going to debut, Ken Michaels gets in touch with me and Alan goes in and says, we got an email from Peter Jackson wants to come on the show. Being an idiot that I am, and not being much of a massive moviegoer, I don't know who Peter Jackson is. I'm not into the Lord of the Rings or
All right, but
uh,
it's Google. You can look it up, but okay, okay.
but of course, and also I'm the skeptic going, yeah, Peter, yeah, that's really Peter. It's probably a Peter Jackson who works at a gas station in Boise, Idaho, that's got a couple of Beatle records he wants to come up. No, it was the filmmaker who happened to be a fan of our show, listened to our show when he could, was probably listening to our show through COVID during the time that he was basically building the documentary. And he reached out. He says, I'd love to come on your show as a guest, not to promote this thing that's coming out in a week. I have no connections to Disney here. I'm not doing it as a promotion. I'm doing it as a Beatle fan and wants to learn more from you guys. And and he brought all his materials for the documentary. He was showing us outtakes on his iPad, holding it up to the camera. And we had a 4 hour conversation with Peter Jackson that is sitting in the Things We Said Today archive. Google search Things We Said Today, Peter Jackson. That'll come up. And then he came back on about a year or two later when the Now and Then song came out, the
Yeah.
last Beatles song. And he was responsible for the video. He did work on the audio of the song itself. So he came back on Things We Said Today. And we're due to get a Peter Jackson fix. So every once in a while, I call out to him in New Zealand and say, we could use a guest next time, Peter.
There we go. That's what it
So,
takes. That's what. So let me ask you, because because we do have to tape another podcast right after this. A couple of more quick questions for Darren DeVivo.
sure.
First of all, is your favorite all-time song a Beatles song?
No, I don't think so.
Well, what is it?
No, you know what I think? Like I always say, the best rock and roll song ever. So it's my favorite. It will always have me cranking the radio in the car. Is "Stay with Me" by Faces. Rod Stewart and Kenny Jones and Ian McLagan and Ronnie Lane and Ronnie Wood. "Stay with Me" from Faces is, for my money, the greatest rock and roll song ever. Um, but
But
the Beatles have to be right up in there as well. So in my favorites, when it comes to songs, it changes. Yeah, I'm more of an album person anyway. You
mm,
know what I mean? So, Abbey Road's my favorite Beatle album,
is it?
favorite of all time. I name albums. Songs takes thought. Thought's hard for me. Then I need a nap.
Yeah, you were at a university for 40 years. Forget
Yeah,
40.
that's a lot of thinking. It's too
That's
much thinking.
too much damn thinking. One more question. No, sorry, two more quick questions.
Yeah.
We'll get you out of here, I promise.
Yeah. No,
But
no, I'm fine. We're fine.
if you had 5 minutes to meet with President Trump, what would you tell him?
Huh. Well, of course, I would bring it up to him that he's responsible for me being out of work and not just any job, but one that was completely unique to begin with, and to make it even more unique, lasted decades. And that your, small-mindedness led to me losing my job and a lot of people in public broadcasting just because you say it leans left.
Well, it
And
does lean left, but yeah,
public
yeah.
broadcasting leans left. Therefore, as your punishment, I will take your money from you. And well, that's kind of screwed up way of looking at it, and it's wrong. But however it happened, and here I am unemployed. Thanks, pal.
Mm, all right.
So that would have to be, you know.
Now, my last question for you is even worse than that one. So, it's been a rotten year for so many reasons. Rotten year for you losing your job at
Yeah.
WFUV after 41 years. And then, just in the midst of all this, you, God help you, are a New York Met fan. So, what? What?
Yeah.
How would you fix the beleaguered, bedraggled, berotten New York Mets?
All right. I'm now the general manager of the Mets. The first thing I would do is get the ball in motion to re-sign Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz to lifetime contracts, lock them up to be lifetime Mets. Then Their entire bullpen, for exception of Edwin Diaz, needs to be put out to the curb. They need to completely overhaul the bullpen. And starting pitching, almost everyone is going out to the curb as well. They've got to gut and rebuild that pitching, and I hope they can do it quickly because me and a lot of Met fans are sick and tired of waiting for this. This is the year. And that was supposed to be happening now at least more than once. And it isn't. We've gone backwards. We've regressed. So that's what I think. They must gut and build the pitching. GM David Stearns has to forget that he once worked in Milwaukee. This is New York City now. It's not a small market. You've got the owner's money. Start thinking a little bit along the lines of.
All right. Well, although the minute that they sign P. Alonso to a lifetime contract, he'll break his leg.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. No, you're
right.
right. Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, if you don't sign him, he'll remain healthy and have a great career for someone else because that'll happen too. So either way, damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's Mets land. I was fired right in the middle of their 8-game losing streak in September. And I do remember sitting outside the conference room. I knew it was coming. And I'm sitting there. I'm a panicky bundle of nerves. What am I thinking? Who's pitching tonight? Oh, no. And it was like, oh, it's going to be 5 straight losses now. I don't even have the game to look forward to disappear into tonight. They're going to aggravate me. Darren, can you please come in here now? Here we go. But it was right in the middle of the 8-game losing streak. And then they had insult to injury. I'm a Jets fan, too.
No! Oh, no! I was just going to say, at least you're not a Jets fan. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Whatever happened to the Cosmos? Go back. The Liberty. Somebody find a decent team. And
you're right. You're right.
Please, Darren DeVivo, go find a decent radio station to hook up with, to bring you back. I mean, it's wonderful that you're doing the podcast that people can watch.
But there's got to
things
be
we
more.
said today, talk more talk. Go find them on YouTube with Darren DeVivo. But, we need you back. And we need you back on even the college radio stations.
If you have to, you might have to. I don't know. But I do know that there have been some bites. I've been talking to some people. There seems to be stuff brewing. It's still very vague that even I'm not sure what it is or what could be. And I have a feeling it's probably going to be multiple places or multiple jobs together. Someday I'll get off my behind and get my YouTube channel cooking. And I got the Beatles podcasts. And so hopefully I can take that ball and that'll, be the next phase or part of my next phase.
I'm hoping so. And then again, there are probably tons of radio stations in Riyadh. They're sending all the comedians there. You can probably go there. No, I'm kidding. Now, try Israel first. But, ladies and gentlemen, the delightful, and again, I want to proffer my greetings from Dave, the producer of this program, who, again, 25 years ago, you were very pleasant to him and very appreciative of the rabbi, which was very nice back then on that station. So great to see you again. You look great. You sound great, which is the most important thing for the radio.
Thank you. Yes. I appreciate it. I thank you for the opportunity.
You're so welcome. We will catch you soon on the dial.
Absolutely. Take care.
Shalom.